These are very, very important for us, and it is important for us as a country to work along with the strategy that government has come up with, the energy strategy that was published this year, 2023, about how Uganda needs to transition and what journey, what plan we have for that. Minerals are very key in this aspect, and that's the reason as to why it is my privilege to invite the next speaker to talk about Uganda's energy transition strategy and the role of the minerals sector in this strategy. Welcome with me the Permanent Secretary, the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Development, Engineer Irene Batebe.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. I have the privilege to walk you through Uganda's energy transition strategy and the role of the mineral sector. And as the Minister of Energy and Mineral Development, we've just concluded our energy transition plan working with the International Energy Agency. So the timing is right for us to have this discussion, but also critically, we intend to launch that plan at COP28 in Dubai. So you therefore have gone ahead of COP28 to receive the plan before it's even launched. So as the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Development, we lead in the development of not only our mineral potential, but also our energy and petroleum potential. So today, when you look at our energy subsector, because that sets a basis for the discussion on the energy transition strategy. And when we talk about the energy transition strategy, we are largely talking about our journey to decarbonize our energy sector, but also mining and petroleum, and therefore embed more renewable energy in our energy, minerals, and petroleum subsector. So today, we boast of a largely decarbonized hydropower sector, where almost 80% of our power is hydro-based at about 1,600 megawatts out of about 2,000 megawatts installed capacity by the end of this year. But in that energy mix, we also boast of some cogeneration. We produce some power from sugarcane bagasse, the waste from sugarcane, and today we are producing about 111 megawatts from cogeneration. And then, of course, we do have what we term as solar utility plants that feed into the grid at about 98 megawatts, and some thermal power. And to speak to this thermal power, this is largely run as a security backup. We don't run it on a daily for those who might worry about the emissions. We only call on our thermal when there is a shortfall in the system. But given our ambitious plan to develop, but also industrialize and meet our energy security plan, we have just launched our Energy Policy 2023 that forecasts our demand by 2040 and what we need to do about that. So by 2040, we target to generate at about 52,000 megawatts. What does that mean in real terms? So today, when you look at our potential in terms of our conventional energy, we are able to aggregate about 28,000 megawatts, excluding nuclear. So we are able to draw all our potential on the hydro side, where we still have about 4,500 megawatts untapped. We have some peat as geothermal, about 1,500 megawatts. We have potential for wind, solar, but all of that amalgamated with some bit of biomass, we are only able to generate up to 28,000 megawatts. So the shortfall between 52,000 megawatts and what we have as our conventional potential will be largely covered by nuclear at 24,000 megawatts. I know everyone must be saying ambitious with nuclear, but that is the reality as we seek to decarbonize. Otherwise, ideally, most of the nations today are having quite some gas, but on the journey to decarbonize, we see nuclear starting to play a significant role in meeting the energy security of many nations. But we do also have fossil fuels in terms of our petroleum potential, where we've established about 6.5 billion barrels, of which 1.4 billion barrels is recoverable. We do also have potential for natural gas. Today we report about 500 billion cubic feet. So in our energy transition plan, and the way we look at this petroleum is for us to exploit our petroleum and use the resources or the revenues from the petroleum to then invest in the other renewable energies to meet our target for transitioning, but also for decarbonizing our energy subsector. So the two play a complementary role. So we've had a lot of discussion on extractives, the role of petroleum in this transition, but for a developing nation like ours, petroleum will continue to play that role, but also on the petrochemical side. So our strategy as government is therefore to develop and utilize all our renewable energy resources, but also complement them with some nuclear, and as we decarbonize, a little bit of thermal. So our energy transition plan, what is the proposed pathway? We seek to accelerate our efforts to reach universal access to clean energy. Today, this entire country of about 46 million people, only 57% have access to clean energy or electricity for that matter. So in a bid to achieve our sustainable development goals for universal access by 2030, we must invest. And today on the access side, looking at just distribution, we need up to about $5 billion to achieve our universal access agenda. But under our energy strategy, we also seek to domestically energize growing our economic activity. Because we are a developing nation, there is no doubt that we must develop, and this should be accelerated. But we are not doing that without recognizing the need to maintain our emissions at minimum level. So our other objective in our energy transition plan or strategy is to mitigate near-term energy-related greenhouse gases, for example, for the petroleum we are developing, but also put them into decline in the long term, and we shall see how we will achieve that. So the objectives of our energy transition strategy have largely been to plan for the energy system needed to support our rapid economic development. Each time we are talking about the transition, we cannot hide away from the fact that a number of developing countries are energy poor, and they must be supported to advance and also develop economically. But in our plan, we seek to also articulate a realistic yet ambitious scenario for providing universal access to electricity and clean cooking as provided for in our SDG 7 agenda. So when you look at our country, and we'll demonstrate that later, 80% of our energy source today is from biomass. And it is important that we treat that particular aspect where we are cutting our trees in terms of deforestation, but also we see high indoor pollution. So that is one of our other key drivers. But also, just like we are doing today, the Energy Transition Plan will give us a tool to engage with international actors like yourselves on our energy needs, but also the role of the mining sector to contribute to achieving our energy security, managing affordability, but also mitigating our greenhouse gas emissions. The other, of course, critically, is from this plan, we will come up with a pipeline of bankable projects that we will promote, not just on the energy side, but also on the mineral side. So we should unlock more financing, especially in the context of the Just Energy Transition Partnerships. Now, what is really driving this energy transition strategy? It is largely two features. When you look at our population growth, number one, Uganda being among the highest countries with the highest rate of fertility, but not for the ladies in this room. They are probably outside this room. In this room, you'll find an average of probably 2, but outside, as you go out of the city, on average, we bear about 7 children. So that speaks to our rapid population growth, where by 2040, we will be entering a region of 75 million people or citizens. So we must plan for that population. How will we take care of their energy needs? How will we ensure that we can continue developing while addressing that growing population? But the other key driver, of course, is our GDP, which from the scenarios we've run will continue to grow. We've had largely healthy GDP growth, and we see that continuing to grow. So the total GDP and GDP per capita are expected to grow swiftly, positioning Uganda as an upper middle income country by 2040. And those become the bedrock for this energy transition strategy. So the focus for this particular part is on the green. What you're seeing in 2020 is largely our energy, what we call our energy mix, where 88%, though all green, is largely bioenergy and traditional use of biomass. And you have a little bit of oil in there and then some clean energy. So the key point is, how do we transit that 88% of the population that is using traditional biomass to our target by 2050 under this strategy of reduction to 17%, but also increasing low carbon fuels, meaning combined with all our renewable energy, but also other low carbon sources, to 72%. So we do have that target, and you will see how the mining sector will play a critical role in achieving that. So traditional biomass will be displaced by low carbon power, modern bioenergy and oil, enabling a significant increase in our total final energy consumption by 2050. Now, if we don't do that, we will then continue witnessing a high level of deforestation, and that will not sit well in the agenda for decarbonizing our entire energy, but also mining and petroleum subsectors. So therefore, I know yesterday you had detailed discussions on critical minerals and their role, and in this presentation, I'll most likely be recapping what you already discussed. As part of our strategy, it is coming out clearly that the minerals subsector will play a critical role in driving our energy transition. Minerals will be essential components in many of today's rapidly growing clean energy technologies, and we'll demonstrate that ahead. And we will need these minerals in the manufacture of several components of the different energy infrastructure. Yesterday, you discussed all the minerals: lithium, cobalt, nickel, manganese, rare earth elements, platinum, copper, aluminium, and many others, including molybdenum. So the question is, how can we take advantage of these opportunities for sustainable development? And we are already seeing it. The demand for these minerals is growing rapidly and is expected to increase fourfold by 2050. So how are we positioning ourselves as the mining subsector in Uganda to ensure we can really speak to this global trend that is occurring? So on our side, on the energy side, we have mapped out the different areas where we will continue to deploy critical minerals, and that's why the discussion on value addition is becoming prominent and pronounced. So clean energy technologies require a wide range of minerals and metals. And we have already mapped out, because we do have potential for wind. Ideally, wind turbines would require a range of minerals as indicated, rare earth elements, but also aluminium, zinc, molybdenum, and others. But also on the other side, on the solar side, solar panels use a whole array of minerals, including some rare earth elements. So how do we support the supply chain? And we are already driving on the energy sector development of the supply chain to be able to manufacture these solar panels locally within the country, but also the batteries, ensure that those can be manufactured locally. And that will go a long way to support the value addition agenda that we are driving as government. And then, of course, on the electric vehicle side, we are already running an e-mobility strategy where we are already seeing penetration of electric vehicles, but also the 2- and 3-wheelers, what we call border borders in the country. As on the other hand, also on the electricity networks, where we have significant work as a ministry. How do we reach our universal access? We must invest in our distribution network. We must invest in our transmission network. This comes with transformers, substations, and all of that. We are talking about copper and aluminium as key providers of these particular facilities. So what are the key drivers of the critical minerals market? You've already probably discussed this as of yesterday. Globally, we are seeing electric car sales increasing. And we've seen those increase by 60% in 2022. And we are now talking about more than 10 million units globally. And as a country, we cannot hide our head in the sand because we do trade in the global market. We import vehicles. If we've been importing internal combustion engines, shortly, these will run out of supply, even as we develop our local market. So within 9 years, those who have been bringing in second-hand vehicles, you might not find an ICE from Japan, because Japan is transiting where we are currently picking our ICEs. So that's why we are proactively planning also for our e-mobility sector. But also we've seen energy storage doubling capacity as of 2022, and that continues to increase. Why? Because we are seeking for stable power supply reliability. So solar today is intermittent. We cannot use it in the night, and there's a lot of research going into energy storage to ensure that solar can provide base load on grids around the world. So this will continue, and we will see energy storage continuing to grow. We've seen an increase in solar PV penetration. Today, of the 57% access rates in the country, 38% of that is largely solar home systems. That speaks to the solar PV market, which has seen an upward trend. And we also expect wind power to resume its growth after the last 2 years of decline due to COVID-19 and other global challenges. So this has led definitely to an increase in the demand for critical minerals. And you can tell from yesterday's discourse that critical minerals did dominate the discussion. So driven by the growth in demand in the energy sector, and we are experiencing growth in lithium, but also a jump in cobalt usage at about 70% and a rise in nickel demand. So the market size for the key energy transition minerals doubled in the last 5 years. And today, by 2022, it had clocked $320 billion globally. What does this indicate? This indicates that critical minerals are now taking center stage in the mining and metals industry at the same level as it is for iron ore and steel. So if the song had been Still, 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 we are now going to be singing critical minerals alongside steel. So the scene is changing, and that vehicle was largely to demonstrate what it takes to manufacture an electric vehicle vis-a-vis an ICE-powered gas car. And you can see the array of critical minerals that you need, but also comparing the levels in terms of amounts. What a gas car will require, the black, vis-a-vis the green combined, aggregated, of what an electric vehicle will require. So that speaks to the industry that you're discussing during this conference and the need for the Chamber of Mines and Petroleum to galvanize all efforts to ensure that you partner with government to advance our critical minerals industry. So just to paint it further, this largely goes to show precisely what we are injecting in terms of minerals for the electric vehicles vis-a-vis the conventional cars. And you can see as the electric mobility market grows, the demand for these critical minerals is going to be significant. So on our side, on the electric mobility side where we are working with a number of partners, we have also worked out under this strategy, the energy transition strategy, an ambitious plan for our electric mobility. And one of the new potential and growing energy demand centers on our side as the planners is now e-mobility. We are planning on how to support charging infrastructure. We are planning on how to ensure that we are providing reliable and affordable power. So the strategy is for Uganda to be an early adopter in the African e-mobility space by planning strategically, but also anticipating the future needs in the energy infrastructure and manufacturing sector. And we've put at national level an entire committee that is steering aspects of e-mobility. So e-mobility will not only provide an additional energy demand, but will also support our endeavor to make our grid smart, apply digital solutions to ensure that we strengthen our grid. So the strategy aims at transitioning from ICEs over time, it's gradual, to electric vehicles. We've set some initial targets, and we are concluding some consultations on these. And we're already seeing a drive for the 2- and 3-wheelers, the bodabodas. We have had a lot of private sector interest, and we've already entered a number of partnerships with the private sector that are driving an ambitious plan for the 2- and 3-wheelers. So we expect that by 2025, at least 30% of the 2- and 3-wheeler sales will be electric. And I know we've just signed a major contract with one global company on this, and they are doing it privately. We only come in to provide incentives and other fiscal support. And then the 300 electric bodabodas by 2026 with sufficient battery swapping stations in place. And we are already engaging the bodabodas. I know they have their concerns, and we continue addressing them. They have concerns on the longevity of the battery, whether they can drive long distances, and these are some of the aspects that we are discussing with them. And then on the electric bus side, we've already set up a local manufacturing company, Kira Motor Vehicles, and are working within their strategy. We foresee about 1,000 electric buses on fixed routes electrified by 2026. Ambitious, but we are working with Kira Motor Vehicles and other private players that might come on board. And then on the energy side, the issue of charging stations is very critical. So we have started in our plans to plan for about 300 bus charging stations established by 2026 with fast charging stations around mobility hubs in 4 cities. Now, this the government cannot do without the private sector. And that's why we are very keen on forming partnerships, but also creating a conducive environment for the private sector as we work towards these ambitious plans. This map is not new to all of you. You probably discussed it in detail yesterday, or at least my Commissioner for Mines, Madame Agnes, must have discussed it extensively. But the critical message here is that Uganda is really blessed to have quite a number of those critical minerals, and that's why we've been keen to work on our critical mineral strategy so that these minerals are developed in a manner that will benefit the country. So we boast of rare earth elements, and we're already doing some work with Rwenzori rare metals. They must have spoken yesterday. We are also working on a number of other projects, the 3Ts, Woodcross, and other companies. So Kilembe, Madame Agnes must have highlighted our efforts to revive Kilembe mines, where we should be able to produce some copper and cobalt to support this mushrooming industry. So we do continue to promote a number of these investments. And yesterday you discussed extensively the investment climate in terms of the legal and regulatory framework. But the key point is that as the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Development, we are here to facilitate our investors and ensure that we are handling your requirements in a timely way. We are working on our turnaround time to ensure that consultations can be done within the shortest time possible, and we issue the necessary instruments, be it a license or a permit. So as part of the strategy to develop our critical minerals, number one, you discussed this extensively, value addition remains the cornerstone for our critical minerals sector. And we have done some extensive work with a number of our partners to just evaluate how much value we can retain in the country when we develop the entire value chain. But we are alive to the fact that different minerals can be added to value up to a certain level, and that is a discussion that we are concluding so that we are not setting the same measure for all mineral types. So that we want to create confidence that we will give clarity for the different minerals in a short while. The other aspect is to produce final products. I spoke about supporting the electricity network, the grid, aspects of cables, wires, transformers, etc. So our aim is to ensure we support the downstream manufacturing. So we've partnered with Uganda Investment Authority, but also the Ministry of Trade and cooperatives in the country to attract different investors who can invest in the downstream to be able to offtake the processed minerals. Of course, I've already highlighted our promotion of electric mobility. Our other strategy is to actively promote private sector participation, and that's what we are doing thanks to Chamber of Mines and Petroleum, but also critically national participation through the National Mining Company. And we are already piloting that with Kilembe Mines, and we will see how that goes under the production sharing arrangement. But the National Mining Company will remain our key vehicle for investment in the critical minerals subsector. So we are mapping out some of these critical minerals that will solely be developed by the National Mining Company. So that those 5 pillars remain our key strategy, or provide our strategy for critical mineral development. There are other interventions that we are doing, and the teams yesterday must have spoken extensively to this. We continue to promote investment in exploration, mining, and value addition. Our cadastre system is open online, and we should be able to continue supporting the investors in that regard. But we've also set up some mineral beneficiation centers, but also a modern laboratory to better support the sector. The other aspect is on training and skilling of the youth. Uganda has the youngest population of youth at 70%. It is important that this group is catered for in the planning for the minerals subsector. But also the other aspect that will be promoting with your support and your concurrence time and again will be to build local content through skills development and technology transfer. And local content gives us a win-win situation. The investor gets buy-in of the community where you work, a social license, And then on the other hand, we are supporting the nation to enterprise. So it is a win-win situation. So we will continue working on this with yourselves to see how best we can support stimulation of local content in the country. Then the other aspects we have already addressed. We'll also be strong on aspects of research and development, aspects of innovation, supporting but also encouraging all these brilliant minds that are leaving our universities to be able to innovate and contribute to the mining industry. Now, as we drive our energy transition plan, we are alive to potential shortfalls or pitfalls that we must continue addressing together. And that's why our new Mining and Minerals Act has come out clearly on aspects of environment, social governance. We are aware that mineral wealth can contribute to significant economic growth when done well, but we are equally aware, if not done well, it can lead to significant negative consequences. And those, together with you, we will address. Number one, we will continue to decarbonize our mining sector. And we know that ideally significant greenhouse gases can arise from energy-intensive mining and processing activities. In our strategy, we've run the energy requirements for mining and processing. And they are significant. Running, for example, a steel industry requires almost 300 megawatts. And if not generated from clean energy sources, that can potentially lead to greenhouse gas emissions. So together, we will work to decarbonize the sector. We are also aware of potential impacts in terms of biodiversity loss and social disruption due to land usage, but also water depletion, pollution, and that's why we work with you time and again. Each time you're acquiring surface rights, we are available to just come in and ensure that we are doing that optimally and minimizing the disruption to the livelihoods of the communities that we are operating in. And then, of course, issues of health, safety, and environment, and those we continue to work on with yourselves. So we want to really call upon the companies to continue managing the environmental and social impacts of the mineral exploitation. Otherwise, then that would disrupt our energy transition planning. And we want that this strategy is achieved in a manner that ensures compliance to environment, social governance. This is probably not very relevant for this group, but I'll just hint, since it's part of our strategy, and there's been a lot of contention on the role of petroleum. From the analytics that we've undertaken, we continue to see a growing demand for petroleum, probably because of the factors we highlighted, a growing population, the need to develop, but also other ambitious targets we've set. And this particular aspect is on the transportation fuels. As we support e-mobility, we will continue to see as we gradually expand our e-mobility, and that's the blue. Through 2030, 2040, 2050, you see an increasing aspect of electricity in our transport, but we also see a growing demand that tends to peak at about 2050. So that really goes to emphasize the fact that we will continue to develop our oil and gas industry because of that particular projection. We will still need to deploy some petroleum for the foreseeable future. Just needed to speak to this. There's been a lot of rhetoric around development vis-a-vis emissions, and from our analysis, under our preferred scenario, if we continue as planned, even deploying our petroleum resources, we see that our emissions as a country, and that speaks to the global contribution of most of the developing countries to the emissions, the greenhouse gases, of 4% since time immemorial historically. We see our emissions remaining under control, so no one should worry that because you're going to develop your petroleum, then you're going to contribute enormously to global warming. We have assessed our emissions will remain under control and are in line with the Paris Agreement, so that we don't tilt the target of 1.7 degrees centigrade. But critically, we see we are entering a net zero around 2050, where the level of offset is balanced out in terms of our investments. So when we talk about the energy transition, our transition plan should encompass all aspects, including petroleum, because our contribution in terms of emissions remains largely within the limits for the country, and our nationally determined contributions that we've submitted under the UNFCCC framework. So the energy transition plan is consistent with meeting Uganda's conditional nationally determined contribution for the energy sector. So we will continue to decarbonize, but our target for net zero stretches to 2050, so we shouldn't be pressurized to achieve net zero by 2050.